Awesome. So outline for like everything we do today. I'm going to start like very, very basic. A lot of this stuff some of you may already know, but I like to start from the ground up here just to explain like where I'm coming from and sort of how I view things. My background is actually in like engineering, so I kind of build everything up from ground principles and ground truth and figure it out as I go. So we'll cover what's in a camera, what sort of like look you want to create, and sort of finding your style, and then making lighting choices, because I know when people get started out in like studio lighting and anything artificial, it's like so many things to buy, and it's just like any camera. You have entry level, you have like prosumer, you have pro, you have ridiculously expensive pro level camera gear, all of that stuff. So kind of finding what fits your needs is usually a challenge, so I'll help you walk through that. We'll cover all the main categories of lighting there, and then a little bit of posing and interacting with your subjects. Have any of you worked with like professional models before? Yes, one? Okay. So it takes, usually they're a little more prepared than like maybe a random person off the street, and they can kind of take direction a little bit better, but using your words to direct them in a way that like gets you the picture that you want at the end of the day is less simple than it may seem. All right, so what's in a camera? Basic definition, you have a light tight box. Now the boxes are mirrorless and really, really small. But back in the day, you have like big, giant box cameras like that. Back in the day, of course, film sensors were common. Now you have CCD or CMOS-based sensors. And most people have used either a DSLR or mirrorless camera in some way, shape, or format. Let's see. So in working through like what look you want to create, studio is sort of like a blank slate, where in natural light photography, so you're walking down the street, you have your golden hour, you have your blue hour, you have designated time zones where you might have like harsher light, softer light, light that is more conducive to like certain looks and certain shutter speeds. Obviously you're not shooting at something like 1/500th of a second at like the middle of the night, because you just have a black image. So in terms of like crafting a vision, I don't know how many of you follow me on Instagram, but like I'll post like mood boards and vision boards and stuff on my stories every once in a while. Some of them are kind of weird, off the beaten path. Some of them are kind of straightforward. There's all different, I guess, areas you can explore when you do studio photography stuff. Beauty and macro look is really, it involves a lot of like high-end retouching. So those are the pictures you see on Instagram where it may be the focus on the model's like makeup and face, and you have that very zoomed in, tight look. So you're shooting it somewhere around, I would say, like 150 mil, like up into the 300 range, or with a dedicated macro lens where you can actually get that close. Then you have your traditional like model portfolio shots. You have people that are posed maybe on benches, on stools, sitting down, laying down. You're getting 3/4 figure, full figure, and then you have the less, I guess, creative stuff. You can think e-com. So whenever you like buy a T-shirt on a website, you have someone wearing a T-shirt straight up and down, plain white background. If you're looking to like work in commercial photography, that's something to like master, where you don't blow out the backdrop compared to the person, and then you don't make your retouchers work a nightmare. So it's a great way to make friends, shooting well exposed images. So in terms of like crafting everything that you want to do, you can stick to a detailed plan or like work from a framework. I kind of like to take a hybrid approach. If you're the person that kind of gets nervous in terms of what am I going to do, what am I going to shoot, I usually recommend like maybe saving some model poses that you've seen on Instagram, seen on Pinterest, whatever you may see, and collect them on your phone, collect them on the computer, and then try and recreate them, because part of like learning any artistic endeavor is like emulating the greats, and then you try things, you're like, I like this, I don't like that, and that's kind of my best way to like hedge, like balancing your creativity with your desire to like hit a specific shot. Color is a big thing that I think people don't take into consideration a lot, particularly in the studio. Street photography, sort of natural light photography, there are certain things where if the model is wearing, say, red, yellow, blue, they're going to pop out from like a green backdrop in a nature setting. And then here, if you look behind you, we have these like lighter colored backdrops. We have like light beige and orange, so like a black or a white would pop really, really well. Because you have a contrast of basically a not saturated garment and a hyper saturated background. So all of those things are things you want to keep in consideration. And then in terms of lighting, there's different looks you can see. Again, if you've shot outside in the daytime, like you've probably tried and failed to shoot something like in the middle of the day when it's like really, really hot, the sun's right above you, you have harsh shadows, unless you're bouncing it off of a wall or through a window, it can be really difficult to get reasonable light unless you're looking for something like super, super harsh and dramatic. Balanced lighting that's a little bit of a middle ground of everything is usually what most people aim for, unless you're looking for something super soft. And then as you get into the soft stuff, a lot of the beauty lighting, things that are like up close, very skin detail heavy, the softer the lighting, the softer the skin's gonna look. And it's all things you take into consideration whenever you approach your model. So if you want someone who wants a more dramatic look, something kind of light and airy, all of those things play into what lighting choices you make. So things to keep in mind. That being said, you learn the rules to break them, so don't be afraid to try something new if you're interested. And then people on set, if you need help doing something, it's always nice to have, especially with studio stuff, have an assistant, particularly if you have a model like on a backdrop, they're already like set up, ready to go posed. If you have someone that helps you move lighting, move backdrops, things move a little quicker. If you have a friend, a sibling, someone else who's in your major or works with you in the photography space, it's great to give everybody experience. And you could even, maybe if it's a fellow photographer, swap off. You can offset studio costs, all that sort of stuff. Teamwork makes the dream work, as they say. Sensor size, I assume most people have crop or full frame here. Yes? Has anyone shot medium format? Large format?
Not that cool yet.
Okay. So crop frame is like most smaller sensor cameras. So your Fuji, right, should be a crop frame. And then like the Sony Alpha or the new Canon like mirrorless line, those are all full frame. So there's things you keep into consideration when you look through your sensor options. For most things that you post on Instagram or any other like internet website, unless you're blowing it up on a billboard in Times Square, it doesn't really matter what you shoot with. Most people are either in the left two columns. The next step up from full frame is medium format, which can get, as you can see, fairly pricey. Even though I am a photographer, I've actually modeled myself. So to give you an example, I shot the K Jewelers Valentine's Day jewelry ad, and they had I think it was a Hasselblad XD1, so it's like $20,000 digital sensor on the back, but I think it's 105 or 110 megapixels where they took a picture of a watch on my wrist and like I could like see my skin cells. It was like absolutely crazy with the amount of resolution you get on these cameras. So those are really cool, but the work you can do is limited with them just by the cost. So the only reason you'd really move into medium format on the digital side is if you're doing very, very big, you'd think billboards, things where the resolution in a full frame camera would not be sufficient. The other looks that you'll notice, I don't think I'll ever be able to afford a medium format, but like knock on wood, maybe I will. But medium format film is actually readily available. So I can show. It's like this is a TLR, so this is a medium format like film camera, so it's very reasonable. You can pick these up from like thrift stores for like 40, 50 bucks. And these give that medium format look. Obviously you have to go through the process of shooting the film. But the bigger differences here are as you move up the frame size, you get greater and greater subject separation from the background. So you guys are probably familiar with shooting at like f1.4 or those like crazy f.95 lenses that are like super, super fast. When you get up into large format, like I can shoot with a portrait lens. I have a large format 4x5 camera that is in my car, but it's one of those boxy style cameras where you stick a dark cloth over, focus it, take the shot. But I can shoot at like f22 or f32, and the face and the eye details are in focus, but the back of the ears are out. So the focal plane is like only this wide, even though I'm shooting at like f22, f32. So as you get bigger, that slice of the frame that's in focus gets smaller and smaller, so you have to bump the aperture up. So the lowest large format lenses, most of them tap out at like f5.6. There's a famous lens called the Aero Ektar. It was a military grade like aerospace surveillance camera, so it's f2.8. at this large format. So there's a guy, I can pull his stuff up later, his work, what's his name? Sandy from Meister, he shoots with that large format. So you'll see a picture of like a model in a field and the entire field is blown out. And he's like, it's just absolutely insane. The background like melts off, it's like totally milky, it's just beautiful. But again, you have to go through the bother of like developing the film, scanning it. That's color film in large format is like $7 to $8 a sheet, $7 to $8 to develop, $4 or $5 to scan. So you're looking at like $20 per picture, assuming you nail it. So it can get stressful, but it's fun too. Whenever it pays off, feels great. Focal length too, most of you are probably familiar with this. So super, super wide. You have fisheye looks, which is probably what you maybe have seen if you've done some street stuff where it's big in like the skateboarding community where you have some like kind of jumping over the frame. Ultra wide angles, those are big for like landscape, architecture stuff. Most kit lenses are in the 20 to 50 or 24 to 70 range. And then you get into your traditional portrait and macro lenses from 50, 135, and then you have your telephotos and zoom from 135 to 600. Again, aperture you guys know. Optical quality too. Do you guys have shoot with primes, zooms, primes? Yeah. So the primes are typically better just in general with the optical quality. And there are differences between the brands. They're very marginal. So like the difference between a good zoom and a reasonable prime is not that much. So keep that in mind when you buy stuff. I operate almost exclusively with primes. I have one zoom because I need it, but begrudgingly so. If I didn't have to have a zoom, I wouldn't use it. Okay, good. RAW or JPEG, not going to lecture you guys on this, but raw files, you can get a lot more out of your negatives. Negatives, oh, I shoot too much film. You get a lot more out of your digital files, of course, underexposing in digital, overexposing in film. All right, so choosing your light and keeping a look in mind. So ambient conditions, resources, and your options are like a big thing to keep in mind. So can anyone describe like what an ambient condition would be? What are the ambient conditions of this room?
I'd say pretty soft lighting.
Pretty soft, not strong lighting, right?
Not
Light intensity, and what about the color or tone of the light?
It's fluorescent.
Yeah, slightly green. So we have some white light coming from the LEDs. This is warm, like incandescent light, and then these ones are like slightly green yellow. It's something to keep in mind. So whenever you shoot with studio strobes, if you want to avoid having like a light green cast on the face, the stronger strobe power you use, the more of the frame will be taken up by the exposure responsible from the flash versus the ambient light in the room. Opposite of that is if you have a really well lit, natural lit sort of window situation, you can use that and compensate. You don't have to use as strong of a flash, which can let you shoot flash a little bit faster with different recycle times. And you can also consider even shooting natural light in a studio. So you've probably seen like famous photographers on Instagram with like beautiful light coming in from Brooklyn or LA as the sun comes up or comes down. Just keep attention to what resources you have. So in terms of like natural light options, this bottom right one here is shot with natural light coming through a skylight. So you have, as you can see, the light sort of comes down, the shadows fall like directly down versus light coming in from the side that would look a little bit different. And the image goes from like higher exposure at the top to a more shadow, darker image at the bottom. This is an example of natural light coming in from like left to right. So you have light coming in from the window this way and a fill V-flat that's a white surface to reflect off on the other side. And the V-flat is here to even out the light. So you can imagine if we wanted a more dramatic look, we just let the light come across. You'd have shadow on the right side of the face. This is an example of studio lighting itself. So this is a strobe positioned up to the left. You can see as the light comes across, you have this dramatic shadow on the face. And then I have a strobe sort of at her feet, pointing backwards at the backdrop just to give a little more of an intense burst of color with the light. You can shoot on a traditional backdrop like this and you have this flat color. If you blast it with light, you can get sort of a gradient here that gives you a different look. that I think a lot of people don't take advantage of. This is a similar situation where we have one light coming in from the top, dramatic shadow on the right. You just want to be careful not to bury this. This is borderline like almost too dark, but she's got the black leather jacket on and everything, so feel free to break that rule if you need to. This is lighting that's almost forwardly facing, so directly in front of the model, probably at a 45-degree angle. You can see the reflection of the light kind of come in from the angle in the fishbowl, and you blow out the background in a that's white, so you can kind of get that bright, clean look overall. All right, so natural light, most of you have probably worked with this. There are different options for like what you look for when you look for natural light. Anything that's people who have done like portraits in the park with families, you want sort of even, plain, clean light to work with. When you're doing something more artistic or working maybe in a street photography setting, you'll have something that would maybe look like this, where you have a bridge, a building, something that's interfering with the light but giving you some contrast in what the light does. So this is as the sun sets in the, it's one of my favorite spots to shoot actually. I'd encourage you to go to it. It's called the Run, the neighborhood. So it's underneath the Parkway by Shenley Park, where that soccer field is. Big Jim's restaurant is down there. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's like a big place. But there's an entrance to Shenley down there. Beautiful park, great golden hour light, like no matter what. And it's very like not busy, as opposed to shooting in like Mellon Park or Hartwood Acres or one of these places that are like super frequently visited. This is shot in a studio at Opia in the south side. This also, if we go back to this last slide, this is the skylight coming directly down. So this is the sun above, and then this is the sun at golden hour coming through the same skylight. So you can see how like one lighting vehicle gives you different looks. Again, you have warmer tones on the face, and it's color balanced with the ambient light in the background. This is probably the plainest light I have up here. So this is like blue hour as the sun has gone down. It's very soft. You get kind of clean light. Probably the simplest to implement out of all of them. This one up here, as you can see, I have this very blurry, like milky background. So this is shot at like f2.8 in the middle of the daytime, which is not as easy to do as it would look, as you'd expect. So what you do is, so for these you can use reflector. How many of you have used a reflector? 1, 2, okay. So reflectors, typically, this isn't a traditional one, the other ones are lined up here. Actually, I have one in the box, yeah. So reflectors, they're made up of 2 parts. So you have the outside part, you have a silver, a black, a white, and a gold. And then the inside is a disc like this that's, that you can diffuse light through. Whoop. So that the way that I shot this is you position it basically directly at the sun, and then you'll have the light diffuse through here, and you have this nice soft look without having to use a strobe of any kind. And it kind of gives that look, and it catches your eye just because like that look isn't possible at that low aperture any other way. Let's see here. That diffuses. Yes, it's up. Do you see how it kind of catches in his sunglasses? Yeah, up here, so boom. The only caveat with using these is they come in different sizes. So you can imagine like a very small one like this will cover like someone's head and shoulders. This one would probably cover most of their body. Like this probably covered like into the hip. You'll get this diagonal line, so be careful like where that lines up. They do sell these in like 4 by 8 foot things. So I've been on commercial shoots where I've modeled. So a lot of the times, like they can't control what time of day they shoot because they're busy. They have other things going on. So they'll control the light in the day during the time, the situation that they actually shoot in. So there are light panels that are like as big as that box in the back, as big as this projector, where you put them up on like PVC pipe, and then the light completely diffuses across. So if you've seen like the Nike commercials with someone like jogging along the track, there's a giant one of these things that's like a giant rectangle. They have it floating and it's on wheels, and then it's synchronized with the person coming across to give the soft light as the light comes across on the field. So lots behind the curtain, I guess, with that stuff. Any questions on natural light? Cool. And then lastly here, reflections and refractions. Those who shoot street photography are probably really familiar with these. So light bouncing off of mirrors or reflective buildings can kind of catch in situations that you wouldn't normally see. So keep an eye out for that. I always like to shoot them just to see what they look like and make a note to come back later. So continuous artificial light is pretty much any like light bulb you flicked on in your house before. It can take the place of a bunch of different things. So you can have traditional light bulbs, not recommended. LED panels, so that would be something like that. And these are easy for beginners to manipulate, and they're also easy if you're shooting film. You know what it's going to look like versus kind of having to imagine what it's going to look like if you haven't used the strobes yourself. Advantages of continuous artificial light is it's fairly cheap, it's easy to get. The LED panels themselves, I typically recommend if you're shooting a studio, like reflect it off of something to diffuse the light. If you want a more dramatic look, you can put it directly on. Most people are going to get highlights blown out in their face. It's not going to look super appealing. Word of caution though, like when you reflect that off, so that light, since it bounces off a red wall, it's going to have a red tone on the face. So if you have a reflector or something to bounce it off of, that's like a pure white or a gray, that'll make your life a lot easier in post. So examples of this is a simple LED, so I'll show you. So I carry one of these around. It is a LED that lets you, it's very bright, but you guys get the point. Let's see, and then you can control the color as well. So this is an LED basically positioned up to the left with a reflector and fill light set off to the right to catch the light. This is a situation where I was doing a branded shoot for one of my buddies at Pitt Johnstown at a studio. It's called Studio 42 out in Johnstown. Just opened, has a beautiful cyc wall. Highly recommend you go out there if you haven't been there before. But it used to be an old motorcycle shop, so it's got everything opened up. But they had basically LED strip lights that you can go through and work with. Again, not a whole lot you can do here creatively, so I opted to go with something a little more like punchy, contrasty, to sort of compensate for that lack of color. This one, we'll go with this one for less complicated. So this one balances a technique that I learned from a photographer called Nick Fancher. Does anyone follow him? So he's based in Columbus. He does a lot of color balance and like shutter drag photography. He has a few really good books. I link his stuff in the back of this, and I'll give you guys a copy of the presentation too. That works around like setting your light balance in camera to achieve different looks. So by cooling off your white balance in camera, you can make this scene look dramatically more blue than it actually is in real life. So you can imagine like this is a traditional sort of like evening shot, and I have this red LED that's positioned like under the ruffles for dress, and the red tricks your camera sensor to adjusting the white balance. So if you do it manually and switch it in camera, you can get these dramatic shifts of color from red into blue. Last one here, also with that same LED. This is really turning into a hype commercial for that LED, but it's nice because you don't have to plug it in anywhere. It's a long exposure, so shutter speed here is around like 1/10 of a second, 1/5 of a second, and it's at a fairly high aperture, so this is probably around f14, f11, and I have my model here moving this around to give this dragged effect with the light. These extra flares on the side are from a filter that I used. It's a split diopter filter, so the middle here you can see is like perfectly clear, and then this is sort of foggy on the outsides. Those are lens elements you can add that aren't necessarily part of the light, but they can accentuate, as you can see, what the light is doing. Strobes, probably the bread and butter, what you came here for. You can use flash on or off camera, so if you've been to a wedding, like people have this like flash bounce cards that they stick on top of their cameras. That can give a specific look. If the longer you study photography, the more you start to pick out trends in how portraits are taken, how artificial light is used. So you've probably seen that classic look with like a model white backdrop with a harsh like black shadow. on the back, and it's very big in like New York. And so when you think about these in a grander context, like New York, there's not a lot of space. There may not be a lot of light. So the things that will organically sort of bubble up and become the most popular are the things that are most accessible to people. So with those flashes, you can imagine like point and shoot cameras, on body flashes where you just have a white wall or a wall that you've painted white in your apartment where you can, boom, like knock a few pictures out of a model and then have something that's like acceptable in terms of like quality and look that you're going for. And of course, since they're easy to take, they become popular. And there's certain things like those golden hour shoots in LA. Like the light is literally different in Los Angeles. So if you have a chance to travel, see these things, there's a reason they exist, and something just to keep in mind. So most studio setups are going to be off camera, sort of like these situations we have behind you. Most are going to be off left or off right. So off left or off right is going to give you a situation where you have a cast of like highlight into shadow from one side of the face to the other. The exception to this rule is, I would say, like beauty or macro photography. Typically it's like directly above to soften all of the features and not give a dramatic angle to the left or right. Has anyone here used high-speed sync before? No? Okay. So these strobes here are traditional strobes, so they're not dialed in with high-speed sync flash. I can pull up some pictures of this later as well. But the high-speed sync flash, basically a traditional flash, you can sync from any shutter speed below 1/200th of a second. And then high-speed sync will work with 1/200th all the way up to 1/8000th of a second. Something you have to keep in mind, though, when you're shooting at 1/8000th of a second, you need a very, very powerful light. So you may have seen maybe editorial beauty images where it's clear they're shot with a studio light and they're backlit by the sun in the middle of a field. That's like a $3,000 light to like hit them with enough energy, and it's like a blinding amount of light. Where you can sync the flash speed at a high enough shutter speed where it brings down the exposure of the sky and it's not blown out. Most things in the studio, 1/200th of a second is totally fine. The high-speed sync feature is something that's newer. So when you're going through and like potentially looking at purchasing one of these things, like HSS or high-speed sync is something you want to look for. Traditional syncs work with all cameras. It's something to keep in mind. So if you have multiple bodies, you're looking for things, I would probably recommend you stay there to start and learn. High-speed sync is specific to the camera body. So you'll have to buy a Sony one, you'll have to buy a Canon one, you'll have to buy a Fuji one, because their protocols on the inside are different for syncing up the flash speed with the electronic shutter. TTL, does anyone know what TTL means? It means through the lens. So TTL is like what the old film cameras do, through the lens metering, where you can meter and get the direct exposure. Now, like TTL flash is through the lens exposure for the flash, where you'll take the picture and it meters off of the known intensity of the light and what your camera's seeing on the inside. I typically recommend shooting in manual to start to kind of learn and figure out things. The only times I shoot in TTL is if I'm in a very like chaotic setting, which is not traditionally associated with the studio, but maybe if I'm shooting a wedding inside and have lights set up where I'm not really sure what I'm going to catch, but I'm trying to catch action and candids and stuff like that, I would shoot TTL there. There as well, you can kind of keep in mind, you can use your exposure compensation dial, so up or down 2 or 3 stops, and that can do a lot of the work for you if you're not really sure what's going on, but I really like shooting manual because it's cool. So strobe, some examples here. This is a strobe, again, off to the left with one strobe coating the entire backdrop. So it gives the image of more of a pop of contrast in the background. So if you have a situation where, like below, we have one light off to the side and a reflector on the right, he doesn't pop out as much from his background as she does because the exposure indication of this one is a little bit higher than the one on the back. Not that being said, they're both like good pictures, but it's just the look you want to create. Anything if you're doing any like e-com stuff where it has to go all white on a website, you typically want to blow the background out because then it's easier to pull things out in post. What else do we got here? This is lighting off to the right side this time, but a fill that's basically placed underneath her chin. and that evens out the light so it comes across her face without getting too dark. And then this is as you can see, Reflectors placed down here. It's a style I kind of leaned into. I don't know if anyone has followed me for a long time. I've kind of bounced around with this where I do these kind of close-up shots and then sort of like behind the magic of like what's actually happening. So this shot is a very, very high light synchronized with the reflector at the bottom to fill and even out the light. This is an example of a macro or beauty shot. I don't know if any of you have TikTok, but Sydney's like TikTok famous. I think she has like 6 million followers. She's like, I met her when she had like 100,000, so it's like crazy. She teaches like 14-year-olds how to do their makeup and makes a ton of money. So this is like a neon eye look. This is around 200 mil, like a zoom lens. I can blow the detail up for people who are curious, but again, we have, if you look in the light, we have the light of the strobe coming in her eye, and then a soft reflector sort of at the bottom part of her eye near the iris. But again, it's almost flat facing the model. You see how like the shadows here are very, very soft versus something more dramatic like under his chin. And that's kind of traditionally what's shot with beauty, but again, feel free to break the rules if you feel the need to.
Are you using your, do you use your flash in your camera? Are you also using strobes?
On the body, or?
I'm just like, when do you decide, like make decisions on when you use flash with the strobe, or do you just not use?
Yeah, so the strobe, so I guess to clarify your question, so like, do you mean like a flash like this, or?
Yeah. Flash in the body.
Yeah, so you don't, I typically don't use the flash on the body in combination with the strobe. So I'll either use flash on body or strobes. The strobes are just generally more powerful. And then there's also differences in quality of light. So whenever you look into strobes, like what's available to buy, the lower budget end stuff, you can buy strobes in like the $50 to $200 range, where they're like pretty good quality and they have decent light coverage. And basically, as you move up, you'll have more consistent strobes. Not to say that the cheaper ones won't work, but the color rendition of the light coming out will be almost like pinpoint accurate from one shot to the other. Where when I shoot with these, I upgraded my strobes recently. When I shoot with these, I don't have to white balance them because it's like pure white light that comes out every single time. It really just speeds up your workflow at the end of the day. Not a big deal if you don't have that to start, because you can kind of just color correct for the white balance later, but it gives a cleaner image in camera and kind of closer to what your final image would look like in post. If I'm using on-body flash, I'll typically shoot, I would use like a speed light on the top. Have you used one of those before? So I use a speed light as opposed to like the on-body flash, just because it gives a little more power.
I don't know what speed light is.
Okay, speed light is the, do I have one with me?
It's like the kind that you like have it like and you're holding it up, or?
It is, it's one of those,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So it can feed into the top of the camera. All of the cameras have different mounts, so like I can mount a speed light. Yeah, shoe mount on the side.
So and like I've seen photographers with flash do both like actually hooking it onto the shoe mount, and then others like hold it, like Bruce Gilden like holds it up here.
Absolutely.
And takes photos. Like, which one is there just a difference in preference? Or
Yes, they both give different looks. So it's directly related to like what look you're going for. The on-body look will give it's a traditional look that I think will look more normal to most people's eyes, because you've seen like disposables and like pictures from like 30 years ago. Like you've seen this like body of work of like flash directly off camera. So that look is generated by having a flash that's near the focusing element of the lens. Now the ones where they pull it off to the side, you can get more of a sort of dramatic look where the shadow comes off to the side. The way to do that, again, depends brand to brand on the flash, but like my Sony has like a wireless trigger, so you can wirelessly trigger your hot shoe flash. So most of the more new ones have either Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connection where you can trigger the flashes, or the flashes can trigger each other. Other thing to note too, you don't have to like jump into these. So you see these strobes behind you, they're Alien Bees, so they're like 120 or 150 bucks. They're like I would say like lower middle tier in terms of expensive. You can actually buy Godok's lighting adapters like this. So the hot shoe flash that he has feeds directly in, directly into the top. Perfect. Yeah, I'm good. And they fit in like this.
Yeah.
And you can actually use these with any of the official like studio mounts to give that same look. Only caveat here being you won't be able to pump them up as high. Like you have much more power with these, but here you have like something that's battery powered, so you can work around. When I started doing studio work, I started with these.
Yeah.
So you can make it work. I would say like your ISO is not going to go below 400. So you're not going to get like super crystal clear images, but it gets you like 95% of the way there for something that's not super expensive. But great question. Any other questions with lighting so far? General questions? Okay, perfect. So I'm sure your memories will be jogged after trying things out yourselves. So with the lighting setups here, this will be our first sort of break into things. We have one lighting setup. The top one will be here on the left, and then the bottom one is going to be on the right. This traditional Rembrandt lighting, Rembrandt was a painter for those of you who went to art school. I did not, but I learned this on the internet. But the Rembrandt lighting is traditionally denoted by this like triangle you can see from the cheekbone to the inside of the eye, like down to the corner of the mouth, where you have this dramatic shadow cast across the face. And then the bottom one here is called clamshell. As you can see, if you look back at this lighting setup right here, you have like a clamshell that's with a light set up at the top and then reflectors caught at the bottom. In terms, again, you can shoot these with whatever you like. This is traditionally like a more masculine setup, and this is more of a feminine setup with like a softer, like more even light. That being said, you can flip-flop and shoot people either way you'd like, but that's just traditionally what's seen. The catch lights you can see in people's eyes. There's like flecks of light that kind of like liven up people's eyes. They're placed around the models, basically around the bottom part of like the U shape of like where their chin comes across their body. So for these, we have two placed off to the side. So you'll see catch light at the top from the strobe, and then two from the bottom with a reflector. People have done all sorts of creative things with these. So I've seen like a Sports Center commercial where they made the strobe. Someone took the time to like make strobes out of light bulbs, sync them up, and then match them to like football players' numbers. So whenever the flash goes off, you see the number in their eyes.
Cool.
So there's all different things you can use. So if you can imagine, if you use like a rectangular flash or a rectangular reflector, you'll get a different hook in the eye than you would with a flat or circular one. So there's always room to think out of the box with this stuff, just sort of a starting point. Are there any questions with these so far? Go ahead.
I don't know if this is like related to like a specific light.
Yeah.
But just strobes in general. What is like, I don't know, in my head the difference between having the strobe versus continuous light?
Yeah.
Like what kind of effect?
Perfect.
For them?
Good question. So I have this. This is my favorite part. So we're going to go out. You guys have all used like digital editing software, so you've seen like a histogram before, right? All right, so when you shoot ambient light, you'll have, say, a normal like distribution of a histogram with your highlights on this side, shadows on this side. And then when you shoot with a strobe, you alter the distribution of where this light is coming from. So this would all be, say, natural light at the top. And then when you shoot with a studio strobe, for the example of like, say, a speed light, most of this, you're going to have a decent percentage that's going to be from your ambient light, and then you'll have an associated percentage that's from the strobe itself. And as you move up in power, so this would be speed light level, once you have very, very heavy duty strobes, basically the ambient light is just this very minute or even almost non-existent part of the histogram, and all of the light comes from the strobe itself. And so the more you get into either this territory or this territory, the more you're going to avoid the issues with like white balance or weird color casts on people's skin or shadows. When you're in the middle ground, again, when you don't have a strong enough strobe for the situation, you'll fight a little bit with the ambient light. It's not to say that like all hope is lost when you like don't have like super powerful strobes. Typically in this situation where you have a green light focused on that may catch under their skin may look normal, but then they have these weird shadows underneath their neck or towards the back of the backdrop. You can go in Photoshop and then you divide, like new layer, divide, and you divide by that color. So if it's cast purple or if it's cast green, you can divide out the green and you brush it in, and then it evens out the white balance, and you have a completely color corrected image. But I can answer specific cases of that as well.
So just to piggyback off of your question.
Yeah.
So strobe means less interference. The more strobe you use, the less interference.
The more power, yeah.
If the more continuous light, you're going to have to battle with ambience more.
Perfect,
Okay.
yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Off of that.
Yep.
So you mean like the timing of when the strobe goes off plus the camera
Mm-hmm.
taking the photo
Yep.
has to do, you can like time it differently then to get us like the speed of light type of thing?
Yes, so the strobes, that's a good question. So I didn't touch on that actually. The strobes will typically fire in a very short period of time. So I did bring an eraser here.
Just so that that's like automatic or what that how you want.
So these strobes, yeah, they're typically fired in an automatic fashion. So you can imagine like you have your shutter opening on one side and your shutter closing on the other. Most strobes will fire like fairly quickly. And so a traditional strobe, the maximum distance this is going to be, the minimum distance is going to be is 1/200. Even 1/125. And so they'll fire here. This is in the documentation of whatever strobe or flash you buy. Again, higher quality strobes fire more quickly and more accurately at the same time. And you'll see things that are a little more messy to the left or to the right. That being said, so you have flashes that sync at the front curtain. So this is called front. This is like level 2. This is a good question. I was going to save this for the second workshop, but we're going into it now. So there's front and rear curtain flash. So front curtain, your camera's computer syncs it with when you initially hit the trigger. Rear curtain, it starts when the shutter opens and then fires right before it closes. When you shoot in a regular studio situation, you won't necessarily notice the difference. They all default to front. The most famous rear curtain shutter that you've probably seen, a lot of wedding photographers use it. So you shoot a fairly high aperture at maybe f8, f11, and you kind of pull the camera on the dance floor and you have those like shuttering lights that like swing across the frame. Have we seen pictures like this? Yes, no, maybe, okay. Right here. I'll show you a picture. And the rear curtain at the end will sync, let me get out of here. Will sync across, rear curtain, here we go. Sync across the frame. Let's see if I can find a good picture here. That's not. All right, so do we see this frame here? So the shutter being open in the beginning, the end is where you see the end of the shutter. The reason this is rear versus front, you can actually get a similar image shooting front curtain shutter, but basically it's the order of, if you can imagine like painting the light on a canvas, here you're painting the background lighting first, and then you smack the flash to capitalize on the person posing. If you did it in the reverse order and did the front curtain first, you would have a person covered in that squiggly red light. So that's how you're painting like one way or the other. Cool.
Alright, this probably sorry.
Yes.
That just made me like think like so the flash on a camera is that like equivalent to like a built-in strip almost? Like
Yes.
the way it still works?
Yeah, so they all work the same way. Newer cameras will give you more options like this, where you can set up a rear sync. I think most modern cameras have it. The Canon ones I think are a little bit easier to use than the Sonys. I haven't done it on Fuji, but I'm sure it's possible. Yeah, it's in there somewhere. Other ones you can do, when you shoot manual, you have the option to shoot multiple strobes. So this is a situation where That histogram is composed of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 strobes. And again, you can buy very fancy lighting equipments to do this, but you basically vary the power of each flash according to what you want. So this is a high-powered flash followed by maybe 4 to 5 medium-powered flashes, and then a higher-powered flash at the end. And those are all synced up with the wireless transmitter. Of course, this dude probably has a ridiculously expensive light, but it's possible with the strobes themselves.
So like that photo,
Mm-hmm.
how much of that like has to do with the strobes versus like shutter speed and aperture and everything?
This is almost all the strobe, because if this image was if you had the aperture any wider, it would just be a blown out white image. So it has to be very, very dark, and then it's punctuated by the people's figures as you light them up. So it's you start out with a blank canvas and you paint purposefully where the people are going to be with the flashes. It's very big in like sports photography and stuff. You can get very creative with it. Again, I think there's really awesome implications with this in any sort of sports or active things where people are moving around. You can see her headlight bouncing back and forth, and it mirrors the cadence of her actual run. So you can get really, really creative with this stuff as you go through. Sound good? Typically, these will all be in a darker situation, punctuated with like short bouts of light. I would recommend starting with this and then moving to this, but you can always give it a shot. This is always fun. I think if you have a speed light or an on-camera flash and you're shooting maybe with a model or a friend at the end of the night, you've killed the golden hour, blue hour, like it's kind of dark, there's nothing else to do. Throw in a few shots like this, play around with your shutter speed and settings, and try and recreate stuff like this. A lot of these websites will have like recipes with like where to start on your camera in terms of ISO, shutter speed, and you can go from there. So those aren't hard and fast rules, but great way to sort of practice. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Cool. All right, so we're gonna move into our first studio session. We're gonna do like 40-ish minutes. We'll probably give like 10 minutes each with each lighting setup, and then we'll flip-flop and switch. Everyone has a camera, right? I have an extra one if not. Okay. So everyone get their camera out, ready to go, and we can get rolling. I'll recruit everyone else to come in from here. This is soft blue hour light, but with no additional light. Now here, this works compositionally because you have the darker subject that pops out from the brighter background as the sun's going down. Hard or soft? Soft. Yep. Hard or soft? Hard or soft? Hard or soft? Hard. Hard or soft? This is borderline, but yeah, I would say a little harsh. This you can do with the same lighting setup we have with Joe, and you can exaggerate. You practice with your model. When they face forward, you'll get that Rembrandt lighting, and as they turn their bodies away, the more shadow they'll get down the side of their frame. This one as well. Soft. Soft and soft. This is soft left to right, and this is soft top to bottom. So this is light coming from left to right and balanced on this side, and this is light coming down that's balanced forward. I think Kemuel mentioned like shooting outside. This is shot outside where you shoot wide open with that really blurry background. But what I have him doing, I do this all the time when I shoot outside and have portraits. You get a very, very big tree that has some decent like branch coverage and it's not like kind of blotchy, or a very large building, and you position your subject in the shadow of the building, frame them and expose them properly, and then the outline of the shadow, it'll be a little bit brighter, but they'll stand out, and then you get that really nice crisp, low aperture look without it being like blown out or super contrasty. Okay. Catch lights. This I do, you mentioned like not being able to watch a movie ever again. You're gonna get cursed like me. So when you watch movies now, you can see all this where they set up the lights. You wanna watch like edges of the head, corners of the face, eyes, and you can read where the light is. So I challenge you to like look up like photographers that you admire or images you'd like to recreate and try and figure out what actually came about, like how the lighting situation happened. There are some that if you find them, feel free to like DM me and screenshot if you can't figure them out. There's some that like are very hard to reproduce. So there's some high fashion like umbrella stuff. So like these, you see these like umbrellas. This is like 48 inches across. They make like 12-foot umbrellas. So like it goes up to the ceiling and it's just a giant circle. And they'll shoot high fashion stuff on that. But that gives a very flat, even like you can imagine just wave of light that hits. Those ones that you can identify what you can recreate easily and what ones you can't. And it also gives you an appreciation for like why those things are so sought after, because they're very hard to do. So here with catch lights, the lights, the eyes sort of seem dead. We have this bright, kind of cheery, like feminine image with, my friend Sydney did makeup, and we have sort of contrasting sparkles here, and there's no sparkle in the eye. So I kind of like the contrast here with sparkly makeup, like dead in the eyes. Here is a balance. So this is similar to what we had with Rachel, but it's not as many catch lights. So here we have light above, which you can see on the top part of the eye, and then reflector below on the bottom, and that's that clamshell that we practiced. The way you can distinguish where the light comes from, because some photographers will actually shoot from below with the strobe itself will be brighter than the reflector. There's always light lost from strobe to reflector. So it'll probably be like 70% of the intensity of the original strobe. Here we have the strobe at the top, position camera right a little bit higher, and then you have two catch lights very, very close to the subject. So you can even see how the white kind of comes in on her shoulder. So there's one balanced here and then one balanced here, and you get these kind of unique catch lights that come in. Again, this is a situation where you could like spell out like an initial or a number in there and get a different look. Okay. So modifiers and equipment, this stuff is also where you can just start pouring money down a hole. So honestly, there's not, the things I would like suggest to get first that are like biggest bang for the buck would be, yes, maybe Snoot. I do have a Snoot here. If you're interested, you guys
Yeah,
can.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, we'll get to that. That's actually, it'll be fun. So speed light, this is the on-camera flash that we talked about before. In terms of like bang for your buck purchases, reflector is king. Like your reflector, like small one, like 10, 15 bucks, big one, 30, 40 bucks. You'll use it everywhere. You can use it as a diffusion disc outside. You can balance light for portraits. You can reflect, you can bounce, you can use it in studio, out. Thank you, Rachel, I know I'm funny. So we have the reflector. That's what I would say, like bang for the buck. If you have to buy something, if you don't have one, get one, practice with it. You can make really, really good portraits outside, especially in like golden hour light without any expensive strobes with a reflector, because you're getting you're making artificial light that doesn't exist because you're manipulating what's already there. Umbrella and octabox. So you can imagine these, the umbrellas look like this, and then the octaboxes look like this. There are subtle changes to how they render light. Most studios will just have a plain octabox. This is kind of industry standard. And they vary in different sizes. Again, they can come small or big. The bigger an octabox is, the more light you need to fill it, but the more even light it's going to give in general. There are also different depths of like how deep this, if you can imagine, like if the umbrella is a little bit flatter versus like pulled out almost in like a parabolic shape, the further that pocket goes back the light sits in, the more contrast you're going to get, more of a punchy look. Even though it's soft light, there's different varying degrees of soft. That being said, the flattest, as you can see, is the beauty dish, which is what we had with Rachel, where it's an almost flat plane, almost like a dinner plate, where you get that blast of light that's even. You can dress these bulbs up with gels, so you can add colors in as much as you'd like. They do sell dedicated, dedicated gel covers with different colors. So like a lot of times if you blast them with white light, use like a red or blue accent, you can get like a creative effect. These can also be fairly expensive too and like change from one lighting setup to the other. I honestly they have like translucent like colored plastic on Amazon for like 10 bucks, and there's like 100 sheets. I duct taped them to lights, and you would never tell a difference until now because I just told you. So they're really great. The only ones you need specialized ones for, like the Snoot, they don't fit, so they have to go in there. Yep. If you pull the front off of that, there's a, yeah, that is where you stick, you'll stick the filter in between those two pieces, and that'll give you a different look. Again, umbrellas, as you can see, speed lights can be modified with the umbrellas. Beauty dishes we covered. All right, strip boxes will give a similar look to an octabox, but it gives, again, flat light versus sort of a rounded feel. And that's something you'll have to work with intuitively. Typically, strip boxes are used for like rim lights. So you imagine that you've seen portraits where it's like soft light on the face, and then there's just like arcing white light around their face. That's what that's going to be used for typically. There are some very strange like beauty macro lights where you actually stick your camera through like a donut hole. Never used one myself, but it's out there. The honeycomb grid is an attachment that most lights take, where you see this sort of honeycomb pattern. And the grid itself, again, bumps the contrast of that actual light and makes it less soft. So if you can imagine all this nice soft light being shot out of a diffuse light to start, and then you make it go through these concentrated holes, and it kind of straightens it a little bit to give more of a concentrated contrast look. And again, you're kind of being nitpicky here in terms of like what the light looks like, but once you get better and better and more proficient in the studio stuff, you can know how to like dial this stuff in as much as you'd like. The Snoot gives a look where the light is concentrated in one area versus spread out in the umbrella. So you can give really, really dramatic looks. I've seen really awesome stuff done where the face is lit up here, and then their back is lit up by a key light. So you have the image of their body like outlined in white, their body's completely black, and then their face is lit up. So it's almost like this, like someone being caught in the shadows look. I'll have some pictures of it later. And
Is that what goes in front of the light?
yeah, so the light goes in. It's just like a front
I
cover.
That like went on top of the lens of the camera.
Yeah, yeah.
For whatever ridiculous reason.
Yeah. You can also do, this is the Snoot that's, I would say like industry recommended. I've also made Snoots. So Snoot is really just a long tube that filters the light. And like, so you can imagine when light comes out of one of those big umbrellas, it spreads. And so you're canceling out all those like really crazy electrons that are like pushing out on the side, and you're like dialing them in. Before I had one of these and I was like super cheap, I actually used one of those boxes. So you stick the flash at the end of the box and you shoot through it, and then you get that isolated effect of like where the light is coming from. And it comes out on the other side. Obviously less pretty because it's like a square. It's kind of messy, but gets the job done if you need to do it. Any questions here? Cool. Okay. Lighting setups 3 and 4. Let me see. All right. I'll do this too because I don't want to like kill the vibe at the end of this. All right. So in terms of like organizing stuff and finding sort of my final thoughts around this, finding a mentor is like a really big thing. Whether you want to do this like as a hobby, part-time, professionally, like find someone who's doing what you'd like to be doing, or someone who's done what you'd like to do, and work with them. I've had the experience of like working with some really great photographers, and I personally had no photographic training whatsoever. I didn't take an art class after 6th grade. So totally self-taught. I went to school for engineering, but I attribute a lot of my success to having like really great people to learn under. And it's kind of like my cheat code where like you have this situation here where you can ask me questions in the workshop when you may have sat there for maybe 20, 30 minutes trying to figure it out yourself. Even though you would, it speeds up the amount of time you would have killed trying to figure it out yourself. So people that are really great. Tony is from Pittsburgh, Europe, like Hempfield area. Worked around here for a while. He shoots a lot of Point Park like models and actors. That's where he went to school. He now lives out in LA. Corey Vanderplu, I worked with him in New York City. He lives out in Bushwick, where I lived. I paid him just ballpark. His rates are like $750 an hour, for those who are curious. Yeah.
$750 for
an hour, yeah. Yeah, so he shot ad campaigns for Lamborghini, McDonald's, like everything under the sun. Really, really awesome person, and he shoots all natural light, so no strobes, which is kind of crazy. So if you guys remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a Verizon Wireless ad with like our heroes, like firefighters holding their helmets, people. He shot that. Wow. So that's the guy who shot that. Christina Padden, again, one of my roommates in New York that I met, she's got some really great work. She does a hybrid of digital and film, sort of striking that balance because a lot of people want to be cool and vintagey, but also have some digital images that are kind of in between. Nick Fancher is one I mentioned as well. He's based in Columbus. I've never personally met him, but I've read his books, so I feel like I know him. He's got a lot of really good stuff on like advanced lighting techniques. So shutter drag, like what you were doing with the zoom, playing around with white balance. So there's special things you can do where you use a red gel and a strobe, adjust your white balance, and you can make the person's face come out white and the background is blue. It gives this blue cast, sort of a tungsten look. So he's got a lot of really great work. His workshops are very expensive, but if you'd like to go to them, go to them. I would highly encourage the books, highly encourage his Instagram. He's got a lot of really great work. We can actually go through and like look at these too. Dominique is here as well. She's got a studio in the South Side that's available to like rent and stuff. The other place that I used for the other shots was Opia. So Opia has more of like an industrial, clean, open look. And then Dominique's place has like exposed brick and stuff. In terms of equipment, we have, I would suggest like picking up a prime lens. Everybody here I think has one. Great to pick up used, like, and I really recommend like KEH. So KEH is like a dedicated camera place, just like this. So like obviously check Premiere for what they have. A lot of the times like good used camera pieces of equipment won't even make the listings. Like they'll stay like fairly local just because it's like, that's when you deal with expensive lenses, it's a pain to ship and insure and all that stuff. KEH is great because it's a used camera store made by photographers. So their stamp of approval and like quality grades are extremely hard to like get good ratings. That Canon camera I bought over there was like, I think like a 2-star rating or like a minus rating, and it's literally spotless. So their standards are ridiculously high. I would love to do, like, highly recommend that. That's a really great camera, especially if you shoot film. Got it for like $75. It has autofocus, exposure metering, syncs with your flashes like a digital camera would. So all of those nice nuances that you're used to working with. Highly recommend it. Adorama and B&H are great. They both have stores in New York. If you want to be a camera geek and go there, totally do it. It's just like you're like a kid in a candy shop. It's just, they have like the 400 millimeter f2.8 G Master lens. So it's like a $15,000 zoom lens. There's like giant ones that you see like NFL photographers use and stuff like that. Really amazing place. Find other photographers, like if you know so-and-so, like they're upgrading for 35 millimeter medium format or switching cameras, like always great to like support the people around you and you know. Lastly, Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, they're there. You have to like either bring a friend who knows what they're talking about or be confident in your choice because like it could bite you. I would highly recommend like paying a little bit more for the KEH, especially with new equipment. And when you're getting started, but you can also find some steals in like antique stores. I just found like a lot of really cool stuff in a vintage store this weekend for like $30, and it was like $200 worth of equipment. So beautiful things. All right, so we'll show a little bit of the work of the people I've worked with. How much time we got? All right, so we're still doing good on time. So we'll do Tony first. So Tony's style, I'd like to say he uses a lot of like pastel tones. Very clean look. He shoots Nikon digital and a few images on film. So this is a film shot. These are digital on the side, but you can see how his style kind of is a marriage of very soft lighting, but that gives like a punchy contrast that you wouldn't have expected otherwise. And he also ties in a little bit of black and white. So that's his stuff. Yeah. Yeah, so you see how this is soft lighting with Lily here, but you still have those deep blacks and fairly strong highlights versus something that would be a little bit more low contrast. Yep, great. And then next one, this is Corey's stuff. He does a lot of really great work. Let's see here. His stuff is all ridiculously high res, so we'll let it load for a second. Let's let that work for a while. So this is Nick Fancher's stuff. So you can see he uses like basically the skills we learned here, next level, He has a book that's available on Amazon that's like 20 bucks. I highly recommend it. This is my friend Sonia down here. He'll regularly work with some of the Doherty people, like Joe and Rachel that have come through. He uses a bunch of different looks and sort of outside of the box techniques. This is done with an LED, like I showed you. This is an album cover for those who are curious. This is done through like a prism, like one of those like prism crystal diffusion things. This blue gel, yellow gel, so you could work with those contrasting colors. This is done with a 3-light setup. So this is a situation where we talked about having that nasty green undertone. This is how you take that rule and break it. So you take the undertones that would normally be nasty and green, and you set the ambient light of the room to be yellow and blue. And so the shadow that's cast by the yellow and blue lights gets captured, and your white balance sets on the subject from the initial light. And so you can paint multicolored, you can do red, green, blue, all three. That's how you get that look. Let's see, this is sort of this is a Snoot. You can see how his whole figure's dark, but then you have like the face lit up in the front. This is a multiple exposure. This is a piece of glass hung in the front in a rectangle, and then he sprays like with water and then shoots through the glass in the studio. So you have these very like almost underwater effects, but obviously not underwater, which you could shoot underwater if you'd like. And you can see like these colors are just absolutely beautiful, where he has blues and greens and reds. And these are all 2 and 3 light setups. And all of these are actually done with speed lights. He does not use big lights at all. So he uses the speed lights we saw that Griffin had, 2 of those. Everything he has fits in a book bag. All of these were done with like a book bag. So projector, camera, a 2 prime, an 85 and a 50, and then 2 speed lights, and that's it for all of these. So never limit yourself in what you do, because you can do pretty much all of this with. This is another Snoot example where you have the light coming in. Let's see. Some of these are shot through like a plastic bottle, like a Dasani water bottle. He's got some projector work in here. What else is in here? This is a shutter drag, where you have motions. This is where you set your shutter speed to like maybe a 15th of a second-ish, and then you have your gels fire at different times to give that dragging effect. I think that's good. All right, so that's his stuff. And then Corey's. And this is his wife. So his studio is actually in his house. So I shot, it was his house, his kitchen, and then like his girlfriend's bedroom and stuff are like on the other side, like all in one place in Brooklyn. She's super nice. He's awesome. He's one of the first people I met where I met him, and I'm like, do you mind asking like how old you are? He was like 32, and I would have guessed he was like 25, 26. Like the energy that this guy had and passion for what he did was just amazing. And he doesn't even consider himself a photographer. He does like cinematography full time. He just does this to pay the bills, which is wild. But like crazy guy. So he has a great YouTube channel too. When he started out, he lived in Canada, in Toronto, and he would take the bus down to New York and work in New York, and told people he lived in New York. So he would bus back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until he had enough experience to actually make it in the city. So like there's people out there that are really determined to like make it happen, and you can do it yourself if you're so inspired to. But the hard work has to be put in. He does a lot of really great portraits, as you can see, that are a marriage of like just simplicity and speaking a little bit to a longer message. This is shot with a 135 lens that has a really nice sweet spot. You see how the compression works on the face, where just like the face, eyebrows, and lips are in focus. And that's shot with, I believe, a 24. So you have a little bit more wide of a shot. What else do we have in here that's interesting here? Here's the Weekend. He has some cool friends too. Convenient. Convenient when your subject is like mega millionaire. And then he does some more off the wall people, like some artists that he shoots where you kind of capture the crazy and the wild of New York City. What other ones have I liked in here? This was a really cool color study he did with his wife, Erica. His So this is all pastel tones. It's going to take a while to load, but it's all pastel tones that are done in natural light. So this is like a light pink, a light green, a light purple, and you can see how subtle this is in the backdrop. So this can actually be shot on white, and then you change the color on the edges in Photoshop. And you pull all of these through. So all of these are just very simple tones shot on a white background, but you can see how you can bring a vision together where it's tied together through all of these things, but it's not super complicated. So you have like nature, figure, light, color all coming together, but you see how it's like consistent across all of them. That's a wide shot too. It's really cool framing.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So that's really good. Let's see. Tony's stuff is here. Who else? Let's do Chris's stuff. Hopefully Chris's website is up. Yeah. So this is my old roommate, Chris. She shoots a lot of mixed film. She does more lifestyle work. So she does a lot of like underwear brands and just clothing brands and casual stuff. So you have sort of a vintage look, some relaxed look with couples, flowers. She has this style that she leans into, and she shoots out of a studio in Brooklyn. So in New York, here you can shoot a place like hour to hour. So like Opia is like maybe $40 or $50 an hour, whatever it may be. In New York, you pay, well, unless you're like big time and have your own studio, you pay like a studio membership fee. So like $400, $500, $600, and then you get like 10 hours a month. And you're like, you got Thursday night at 8 o'clock and Monday morning at 9:30 at whatever. It's like you get penciled in. And then people can swing in where there's free time, but there's very rarely free time, unless it's like really weird time. So you could be shooting in all hours of the night just because space is such a luxury in New York. Let's see here. Then Dominique has awesome stuff as well. She does a lot of like personal branding for people. Her studio is available. It's on this site too, so we'll make sure you get it. Let's see. Oh, here we go. This is on the south side, so it has a very open, clean look, so you can shoot natural light in here, exposed brick, that sort of thing. All right, so we hit everybody here. The other one I wanted to show you guys, I showed you guys earlier. Sandy. This guy, he shoots large format. So this is what I talked about when I mentioned object separation from the backdrop. So this is shot on a 4x5 negative. And when you zoom in here, you can see how like sharp these images are compared to like how sharp the subject is compared to the backdrop. This is medium format. This is large. So you can see that whole house is blurred out. Absolutely insane. We have this like dreamlike quality. Okay, so that's good here. Let me go back into this. So last lighting setups, we have one with a bare bulb and then two with a snoot. So our bare bulb here, it gives this dramatic sort of light on the side that comes down. So this is a bare bulb sort of positioned fairly high, and this is one that's more facing forward to the camera. I think the most traditional looks are either high or near where your camera lens is going to be. So like when you guys are shooting, we have the bare bulb set up, you can kind of duck, if the bare bulb's here, duck here, stay around the bulb to give that a look that looks similar to that. The snoot on this side, it's positioned where you have this circle of light. You see how like her legs are dark down here? The circle of light comes in. The further you back away, the bigger the circle is going to be. The tighter you are, like this is fairly tight and it's facing like down, the tighter the light will be. That being said, if it's dark and the snoot is actually firing, they might not be in the range. So you can imagine like someone being beamed up, like it's like Star Trek. If they're not in the beam, you're not going to see them. They're going to be dark. So you might have to have your instruction model to move forward or backward according to what the situation is. And then here, just to add a little bit of spice, we can add a second light here that shoots coming back to give a rim light. You see how it kind of outlines the edge of her body. So those traditionally are put behind the subject, off left or off right, or directly above and off. We don't have the setup for that here, so you need like a very big like strobe arm to like hang it back there and push it forward. But Off to the left or right works just as well. Any questions with these? Okay, cool. I'm gonna get everyone else back in here. We'll get started. Yeah, okay, cool.